and he was out cold. I had to hold his head up. My family said we're not going to call the EMTs or anything, and I was screaming at them, yelling at them. And 5 minutes later, just poof, just woke right up like out of a nap. And I just looked at him, confused and scared, didn't understand, lost. I don't know what happened. And he just was like, no, nothing happened. He just he just started smiling and acting like everything was normal. Um, and and unfortunately the next day he passed, and he had that same episode of my arms, and he died in my arms. And I immediately went into that hyper independence. I went into that, I don't want you to leave. It's not your time. And um, in a lot of ways, in that moment, it is my first experience with death up close. And when somebody dies in your arms, it's terrifying.
Of a traumatic event in a person's life to slow down and rethink of what they're going through, and oftentimes it involves pain. So yeah.
Yeah, that's something you brought up earlier that I want to touch on that I thought was really powerful, by the way, is when you brought up emotions and spiritual maturity. That's something that I struggled with a lot growing up. I never really went to church. I was there at Christmas and sometimes Easter, but I never really found faith with God my whole life. And um, something that I can share today with people who listen to this podcast. And it sounds like we all do this, by the way. That's a human nature thing. But when our emotions are really, really small, they're really easy to deal with. And that can be like, oh shoot, I poured too much milk in my cereal today, and then you let it go because it's not that important. But when you have, um, like your husband shot himself, that's a big emotion to deal with. That's a big one, and that takes a lot more energy to deal with. The thing that I've noticed a lot when I coach people, and even in my past jobs, when we stack those emotions on top of each other and they go on for long periods of time, what really comes out a lot of times after 10, 20, even 30 years for some people, it's not really what happened in that moment that's going on right now. It's 20, 30 years of pain that was never dealt with. And so a lot of older generations, especially, my mom and my grandmother my grandma lost her husband to colon cancer. It was pretty terrifying from what I've heard. But they always push it off to moving on. They always say, it was terrible, it happened, but they always live in that place because they never dealt with that emotion. And so that can get really destructive in your life when you don't pay attention to that emotion and what that message is trying to tell you. And so when you're dealing with compounded emotions that stack and build on top of each other, it gets really difficult to work through those because you're fighting through a lot of your feelings and a lot of your emotions. And a lot of times we self-identify with those things, which it's in our language. I was coaching a gal yesterday who said, I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm worthless. I feel, and she wasn't saying it in the I feel way. She was saying, I am those things. And that's where in our healing process, we have to learn to say, I feel this way, not that I am. And so a lot of people would say, oh, you feel really sad about losing your son, or sorry, you are sad, or you are upset, or you're angry about that. No, I feel angry about those things. I feel sad for that. And when you can separate your identity from the way you feel, you can take your personal power back and you can take control of yourself again. And it's because when you say, I feel this way about something, you're letting that emotion guide you and listening to that message versus identifying with it and taking that on. Because a lot of people that go through, like you said about ego is something we all have, but when it gets too big and boisterous, it starts causing problems in our life. And ego gets expanded when we have this grandiose sense of being. And a lot of times that grandiose sense of being comes from emotional messages we haven't listened to. And so they all just kind of store up in our body like a big ball of energy. And when something or someone, some event tips us the right way, it all comes out. And usually not in the good way, by the way. It gets very destructive. And so that's a place where, instead of allowing ourselves to do that in life, we have a big opportunity in those moments of pain and those moments of suffering and those moments of grief and loss, to not identify ourselves with it as who we are. It's an experience that we had, and we feel a certain way from it, but it's not who we are. And um, what I share a lot with people when they coach with me is, you can always come to me with any kind of problem, any kind of feeling, whatever it may be. And you'll oftentimes hear me say, what was the gift in this? What was the blessing in this? What was the lesson you might have needed to learn? And the gal that I coached yesterday is a prime example. She just kind of looked at me and was like, I don't understand. And I said, that's okay. It's okay that you don't understand. I'm posing those questions to you because what I just shared with you is a different way to see this thing that you see as a problem. It was really a gift. I'll be honest, had my son not died, I can tell you right now, I'd be around my in-laws that are very toxic. They're narcissistic. They cause a lot of problems in my marriage. My marriage would get a lot of strain. It might even fall apart if that had happened. That's a possibility. And so I have a lot of gift, from that moment, because it brought my wife and I closer together. I can also say that it was a lesson losing my child. I can say it's a lesson. I can say that I learned how to stand up for myself. I learned who I actually am. I got closer with my spirituality. I got closer with what's important to me, what's not important to me, what I want to tolerate, what I want to allow, what kind of life do I want, who do I want to be in society. All those things came out of that horrible moment, and it was a blessing. And so when we go through hardships in life, just like you said with your husband, making that decision to put him in a facility, that's a really hard decision to make. There's a lot of thought that goes through that, as I'm sure you could say. And even bringing him home, what's that going to look like? How's that going to change? What's that going to be for us in a new part of our marriage, a new foundation? So looking at those things not as a problem or more pain or more suffering, but looking at it from a gift or a lesson or a blessing in our life. And that's where the beauty of what God wants us to see, in those moments. That's what he wants us to look at. If we can always see the suffering and pain, we'll never heal, and we'll never get to that place where we should have been. And God may very well send us back here, by the way, after we die, if we end up living a life like that, because he's going to tell us, you didn't see the gifts that were there, and you didn't actually live your full potential. You didn't live your full gift here. And I want that for you. I want that beauty for you. And that beauty is found through that pain. So,
Yeah, the pain when it comes to experiencing, a lot of people don't know how to understand it. And they think when it comes to embracing it and allow themselves to cry, they think of it as being weak and being too vulnerable and just being raw, not realize showing that part of yourself and is actually strong. It shows a maturity to be vulnerable in front of your friends, in front of not just family members, but your friends and strangers. Because when I connect with other individuals and they start pouring out what they've gone through, I can tell that they're processing it still, like 5 years later or 10 years later. It's like they're realizing they haven't shared that type of information, and they're talking to a stranger, but it's that connection, like you said, like God puts us in different connections because we've also signed up and made contracts, even if that contract is just 5 seconds or 5 hours or 5 months, 5 years, whatever it is. That chapter is a healing process of growth where one is experiencing any type of catalyst of what they need to learn from the other person. Of they're the catalyst for that other person, and not realize
exactly.
that that's what they're doing before, let's say, they're supposed to be partners, business partners, or romantic partners, whatever it is. That type of contract we all need to go through, um, discovering who we are through some kind of trauma that we're portraying, however that looks like. So yeah. So I was
Yeah.
wondering, sorry.
No, no, you're fine. Go ahead.
Oh, I was wondering when it comes to your son, you said that he was born before he was actually the date that he was actually meant to come out, or
Yeah,
when?
we were about 2 weeks past the due date, which is pretty normal with firstborn children. It doesn't happen that way for second, third, or fourth children, but the first one can take a couple weeks longer. Just normal deal. Um, what happened with that is he just stopped moving one day that week. He stopped moving in the afternoon, and usually he sleeps during the middle of the day, which he was Mr. Hyperboy at night. It was fun watching him on my wife's belly moving around with his hands, and um, but he just stopped moving, and we rushed to the hospital that night and found out he had passed. His heart stopped. It was a very, very traumatic thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail of that 'cause that crushes my soul still to this day. But I'll just say it was a very hard moment, and it was hard to watch my wife and I go through that. We didn't really have family around with where we lived, and we didn't want to be around her family because how they were behaving with us, and so we had to deal with that on our own. That was a very, very big, big traumatic event. I'll share that. Um, but what I'll say about it is when we went to the hospital the next morning to deliver him, and um, I remember when I first held my son. This is one of the most. I still to this day don't fully understand it, but I think I truly believe that God was with us that day, and I don't know how to explain it really. It's just I feel energy a lot around me, kind of like an aura, if you will. I feel that a lot. And in that moment that day, when I went to the hospital, most of it was a blur for me. But when I held my son, for whatever reason, I couldn't do anything but smile and love this child. I didn't have any anger. I wasn't sad. I wasn't upset. I wasn't any of those things. It was just raw love in that moment. Um, and I felt like somebody had put up this like curtain around my wife and I and our son. And it was like it'd be like if you punched a hole through a piece of paper. And inside that hole, by the way, is like right where you are, and that outside paper that's left there doesn't even exist. It's not even real. You just are right in that moment. And it was such a beautiful moment in a world of sadness. And I really think that God gave that moment to me to say, this is what beauty of life is, and this is what love is exactly what you're experiencing right now. Even though his spirit has left the world and it's not with you right now, you're still holding your son. And one of my friends that was a pastor told me many months after this happened, he said, "You know why that moment was the way it was, right?" And I said, "No, I don't fully to this day understand it." And he said, "Your son came to the world without being touched by sin. You essentially got to touch God's love." And so it was such a powerful moment for me because I never really thought in that context. Because when we live in the world as we do today, there's more sin on this planet than you can think about every single day with how we treat people, how we there's drugs and alcohol and a myriad of things I could go into. But um, my son had never experienced sin, never got to. He was God's love, pure in the purest form you can get. Um, and I've never forgotten how that moment made me feel. And I'm gonna try not to cry with that, but I'm just gonna say that it was such a beautiful gift in that moment. And I will never forget how much love I felt in that moment. Um, there was no human emotion really other than love. And that's what I made that choice when I said I left the hospital angry at the traffic light. That's what was flashing through my head so much was that's what I want my life to feel like. I want my life to feel that love that I felt when I held my son in my arms the first time. I want life to feel that way because there's nothing I have ever experienced in my life aside from getting married to my wife. There's nothing I've experienced that has felt that powerful in my world. And you can have all the nicest houses, the nicest cars, you can have $10 million in the bank. I can tell you right now, it will never come close to feeling that kind of love in your life. And if you ever do get to experience a love like that, in your life, cherish it for what it's worth, because it's an expensive and very limited commodity, and it is something that will always be here. It will never leave. It never will. And so when God gives you that, it's a beautiful thing. Um, after my son passed, I still remember I was having a bad grief day. I was building a box for his ashes because we had him cremated. Because I didn't want him to be buried in a cemetery. I just was not comfortable with that. I want him to be home. And so this box I made him, for whatever reason, just was not working out. And I'd been a woodworker, so I threw it on the ground and I smashed my heel really bad. I was in a cast for about 6 to 8 weeks. And anyway, in the middle of crawling upstairs on my knees and my hands, upset, crying, and all this stuff. And the thing that happened to me a couple hours after that is I said, my love for my kid is that strong that I'm this angry in this moment in my grief process, and I'm crying. And not because I'm angry, it's because I love him that much. And so I learned too that a lot of times when you're going through grief and you've lost somebody really close to you, or you've gone through a very traumatic experience and you feel that big surge of anger in that grief moment, 9 times out of 10, it's probably love. It's not anger. It's love. And when you can get to a place where you can see that and feel it, it changes your whole entire state of who you are. And you almost jump into what I felt like at certain points is I felt like I was more of a spiritual being than a human being on the planet, because I was able to differentiate those things. And um, so I wanted to share that part of my story too, because it's a lot of people get caught up in that anger loop and that grief loop, and it's real. It's a real thing, and you can't stop it sometimes. It's a freight train. And that's why I say with grief, you've got to give yourself the space, give yourself the ability to sit with it and feel it. And it's not a bad thing. You don't need to move on. It's a good thing for you, because that you will find sitting in that anger, sitting in that grief, you will feel that love come to the surface just like this. And the more it fills you up and the more you're open to it, by the way, you will get those gifts and that blessing of life. And it truly will change you as a person, and it'll change you in the good way, by the way. But you got to allow yourself to feel it. So,
I was experiencing a lot of chills while you were speaking, and it was really beautiful too while listening to you when it comes to the experiencing that anger part, because a lot of people think that when it comes to holding oneself together, it's the quiet side, it's the more internal of not expressing. They can, yeah.
yeah, that's the thing that I can share with everybody today. It's another thing that I get looked at really funny when I say this, and even when I try to explain it to some people, they just look at me as the deer in the headlights and don't get it. There is not a lot on this planet in our life that we actually control. There's not. And that's a real hard thing for a lot of people to understand, because like we've discussed today, we already wrote this plan out with God before we even came here. We really did. I mean, this things don't happen by accident. I hate to say that. Things happen on purpose, and they happen. The big thing I'll share is all these things do happen for us. They don't happen to us. So don't, when you go through life and say like, oh, well, losing your son happened to you. No, it happened for me, because what came out of that experience ultimately made me a better person. So if I was to say it happened to me, I would be in a victim mind state, and I would allow that moment of life to destroy me in a lot of ways. If I say that happened for me, I gave it purpose. Now it has a meaning, and now I can do something with that. And so you said really well when you were talking about martyr syndrome. You were jogging my memory about a few things, because I was a caretaker for my grandpa when he had cancer back in 2017 to till he died in 2020. And when you get into that martyr state of mind, and it's easy to do, by the way, when you go through grief and trauma, just you're not alone if you go down that road, by the way. And I want you to know it is a hard road. It creates a lot of challenges in your life, but it's an okay thing to experience, in my opinion. When you go down that road, though, it's because you're trying to control something. You're trying to control that experience. You're trying to control keeping them there. And I do believe that's part of our human condition. We all have it in us. You're not alone if you do it. I'll tell you that. But that too, that I learned going through that. When you're in a martyr syndrome, what you're really doing is you're hyper independent. That's a trauma response to things, and we get very hyper independent when we feel like a situation's out of control of ours, or we can't decide the outcome, or we can't force something to go the way we want. That hyper independence comes out because we ultimately are scared of that reality, and and rightfully so, by the way. I flew home to see my grandfather in 2020. He was there for 2 days. He died in my arms twice. The first time, he died in the kitchen. I held him for about 5 minutes, and he sprung back to life. I still to this day don't even understand it. He didn't even remember leaving the room. He he literally looked like he had a seizure, and he was out cold. I had to hold his head up. My family said we're not going to call the EMTs or anything, and I was screaming at them, yelling at them. And 5 minutes later, just poof, just woke right up like out of a nap. And I just looked at him, confused and scared, didn't understand, lost. I don't know what happened. And he just was like, no, nothing happened. He just he just started smiling and acting like everything was normal. Um, and unfortunately the next day he passed, and he had that same episode of my arms, and he died in my arms. And I immediately went into that hyper independence. I went into that, I don't want you to leave. It's not your time. And um, in a lot of ways in that moment, it is my first experience with death up close. And when somebody dies in your arms, it's terrifying. I don't expect anybody to listen to this podcast and say, "Oh, I can handle death now." No, that's the total opposite of what I'm saying. When you face your own reality that one day you're going to die, that's reality for all of us. To see it firsthand is terrifying. It's like meeting your own maker at that point, and it's scary. um, the thing that I can share about that experience too, if you ever experience it or have it, stay very aware when you dream after that happens to you, because um, I talked to my grandpa for an hour after he passed. The funeral home wouldn't come pick him up for 2 hours, and I stayed in the room with him. And I talked to him. I held his hand. I gave him lots of hugs, lots of kisses. I told him how I felt, and I was upset with him a little bit, but I understood. And the thing that I cannot explain, by the way, and this happened after my son died too. And this has only happened to me twice, so I don't have a lot of experience with this. But when my grandfather passed, 30 days after he died, I had a dream one night, and my grandfather literally just walked into my dream, like full, just like you and me are talking right now on a Zoom call. And I remember looking at him really confused, and I was like, "You're back. Hi." Like, I got really excited, and I was really happy. And we spent time walking around wherever this was. I don't know where it was, but we were walking around talking just like the old days, and we hugged each other. We talked about, I think it was boats or working on woodworking or something. Uh, and then randomly he just said, "I have to go." And I said, "I don't understand. Like, what do you mean you have to go? I don't get it." And he just said, "I just have to go." And he said, "I love you a lot, and I'm okay." And then he just left, and I was like, "What happened?" And I woke up out of that dream crying my eyes out 4:30 in the morning. I don't, to this day, I still don't understand what happened. But he showed himself to me that one time, and he also showed it to me, I think it was like 6 months to a year after that. I had another quick dream of him. It was much shorter than that first one, but I share this because when you go through a grief and loss, or you go through a death with somebody that you're very, very close to, like you said, your grandfather and your dad were very, very close to you. Um, they didn't leave you. I'll tell you that. They didn't leave you. They're still there. And so if you leave yourself open to feeling those emotions, and that's kind of where, um, what you were talking about a little bit ago with martyr syndrome, controlling versus allowing that situation to happen. I truly think that you can continue those bonds with people like your grandfather and your dad. You can continue those bonds even if they're not here. They will show themselves in a different way. And as long as you step out of that control and into, I just allow this to come to me. I just allow it. You'll have those experiences. Um, 30, about the same kind of thing happened when my son passed. Really weird thing. Um, I think it was about 30 days or so, maybe a little bit longer after he passed. I had a dream about him. And I this in this dream, it was very, very white, like a bright white light, like around me, if you can picture that. And you can't see faces. You can only see and hear voices. And what I saw was a white hospital bed, and I saw kind of a small crib for a baby, if you will. And then what I saw was like the image of if you were to hold a newborn in your arms. So just picture yourself doing that, and you can't see the person here, but you can see what's in front of you. And I saw arms holding what looked like a little tiger or a lion. And the image we had for my son is a lion. That's our motto for him. And so I saw this little lion being held, and I was going, "What is like? This is confusing." Um, what happened after I saw that was I heard a bunch of little kid voices. Everybody was screaming and jumping for joy, like it was a kid's birthday party for like a 4 to 6 year old kid, and everybody's jumping and screaming, really excited, really happy. There's all this good energy going. And then I hear my grandpa's voice go, "Everybody, quiet down a bit. The baby's sleeping." And he said it in his very calm, mellow demeanor. And I got really, I remember waking up to this dream going, I don't know what the heck I just thought about or experienced. And I always said after my son died that week, I said, I really hope my grandfather, because he's up in heaven, I said, I hope that he looks over Caden for me. I hope he does. And I said, if that happens, I would be very, very happy to feel that or see that. And so when I had that dream, I didn't cry as much, but I was more kind of happy in a sense because I knew hearing my grandfather's voice, I said, he's looking over my son for me. And so I don't have to stress anymore or try to, with my emotions, try to control things. He's looking over him for me. That's great. And I said on top of that, I don't know who these other voices were or who, if they were children of their own or something. I don't know, but the fact that there was so much happiness and so much love and so much positivity and in that room and that dream that I had, it made me say like, my son's okay. He's not in a bad place. God's taking care of him for me. And so is my grandfather for that matter. So I share those experiences to say that when you stop trying to control things with your emotions or control your experience and trust in God, trust in the universe, I can tell you that when you try to push and force and control things, things fall apart. And they fall apart because you're not meant to be there. And that's why that happens. It's not because you're a bad person or you did something wrong or you don't know how to handle things or you're not moving on. It's nothing to do with that. It's that you've got that contract and that plan. And when you deviate from it, your angels are pushing you back into course. They're dragging you back in there. And that's the destruction you feel with your emotions or that sense of control that comes out. That's what you're feeling. Your guides are pushing you back. They're saying, hey, you don't need to be over there, right over here. Um, and I do believe that we all have that capability. We all have that ability to still connect with our loved ones when they pass on. I really believe it. Because I can't explain it otherwise. So
No, I agree. I definitely agree with everything you're saying. And your dream and just explaining how it was as real as like talking as well, how we're connecting. I was thinking of there's this section in the Youre book that, well, Backtrack, when it comes to the dream world, there's different levels. So, okay, so like there's this there's this saying that as you know, we're down here and we're playing our parts and we're fulfilling what we need to do based on the contract that we made with Jesus. And and so in a way we are in this this spirit in this body, that we are in the simulation process of going through life And the more awake we are and consciously awake, the more we're able to draw people and events that need to happen. And even though we've made a contract of what needs to happen, Jesus has put us in situations in our life that percentage is higher for those events to happen, versus if he didn't put us in the situation, then we won't fulfill as much as we agreed. So it's like, I guess what I'm trying to backtrack. So like when it comes to reincarnation, past lives, we go through the next life, or we come down here again to learn the lessons that we need to, because we didn't learn in the last life. And so like with the husband, Jesus told him that he came here in this century, in this time frame with the people, is because in the 1960s he got held back and got addicted to drugs. He lost himself in drugs. And so he lost his mission and what he needed to do in the 1960s. And so, because he was born in 1970, so it shows like what, and it gives you an idea when he died. And he's yeah, so that's a different whole other podcast to discuss when it comes to past lives and how to search yourself up in the past life. But yeah, so in this world that we're living in the simulation process, in your dream, I was thinking about that when a person dives deep into that angle, they'll start seeing, as a person is more consciously awake, the more real a dream is, the more conscious the mind is awake. So like in this life, a lot of people are walking like robots. And so a lot of them don't really know the spiritual aspect of it when it comes to the spiritual war, or the life that we're living in is a learning process. Even if a person say that they're an atheist and they don't believe in God, technically they're still following God, but just in their mindset of awareness of where they're at. And technically they're still worshiping God. I was just thinking about Jerry Sargent. He's a facilitator. He uses that term in versus a healer, because we're all able to heal just by realigning the atoms and the DNA and whatnot that needs to happen to get that alignment and frequency to heal. So he had mentioned that you're still worshiping God. You still, no matter what belief is and faith and what you walk, even if you don't believe in the creator or the universe or whatever you want to call him, you're still following him, because he worded it as that the creator is not just a being, but it's also energy. Because as we know, we all function and how to like manifest things and allow things to happen in our life and whatnot. We follow the flow, and it's because God is energy also. And so I thought it was beautiful how he put it, because that's how I've always seen individuals, even if people think that they're atheists and they don't believe in God, but they're technically still living in that and worshiping him, but they're just doing it in their alignment of understanding with how life works. Yeah, so it's more of understanding the consciousness of the mind. We're all in this together, and depending on the awake, how one is awake. Like with the husband, when he said that he had a near-death experience and he saw Jesus. And I said, well, I saw him too, but I didn't have to die to get there. Like, because I saw him, you'll get this apparitions. You'll connect. You'll have this connection because Jesus is there with you. And oftentimes he it's the angel or entity that will present themselves as messengers as being Jesus. And so it's like depending on where a person is at in understanding. So the husband was like, well, I had a near-death experience. So for him, it felt as if his experience was more accredited,
Oh, like
some way because
credible.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I was like, I was just telling him like yeah, well, it's because of the ego part that he had to self-inflict to get there, to connect with Jesus, because in this realm, his mind physically was just so locked up on the material world. The ego was there for him to not see Jesus. There's a lot of like layers
Mm.
for him to not really see him. And so I was like, so we'll go through these process of discussions and like let him know, like, honey, if you were if you didn't have to go through that process, say you didn't get addicted to drugs in your last life, and in this life you did not get addicted to chasing money, and you are more aware of your life and your world, and you saw that. So he would like lean it on like, well, I have bipolar, that I'm like, well, technically we're just given those labels so we can get ourselves out of the box, at least that we know what we're dealing with. If we can't label a problem, then we can't really find a solution to that, and if that makes sense. And so he was like, oh, so you're saying if I was more humble I wouldn't have shot myself? And I said, yeah, uh, that's exactly what I was saying, because I didn't have to shoot myself to talk to Jesus or other individuals who have that connection. So like in your case, you're able to go into the dream world and connect with your grandfather, and also experience your son is that you're able, your soul was able to go into that realm to connect, well, your physical self, because there's this, I think I went off track, so
Oh no, that was a beautiful way to say that. I I'm glad you shared that too, because I do feel, especially bringing that up, like he he didn't have to shoot himself to find that, but that was part of his journey and part of his story. And I think that there's so much in society around situations like that that we always choose labels, or we choose to have an opinion or judgment or some kind of blame associated with those things. And what we oftentimes don't see, and I try to share this as well in coaching, when I see people who are really hurt like that and are going to do something like to injure themselves, it's a cry for help. This is what people don't, they bypass over and gloss over, but this is a cry for help. And um, I back in 2020, I think it was 2021, I did a deep meditative session with my coach, and I spent 8 hours meditating. And I will share with you, that's a long time to be sitting with your eyes shut, quiet, processing a lot of thoughts. But what we did in that meditative state is I had a lot of past childhood trauma from my own family. And I had a lot of anger with it for many years, just a lot of aggression. And when I would talk about it, it was really negative and very, I don't like this, and lots of things I won't say on the show kind of deal. But in that meditative state, what happened, it's really funny. Um, I had to reflect on a moment I had with my mom growing up that was a very rough time for both of us. And it was a time I was very, very angry. I was a lot of very angry emotions with that, deep ones. And while I was in this meditative state, one of my tasks was to picture, and you guys that are watching this can do this at home too. This is a really powerful exercise. You want to look at that situation from three different views. You want to look at it from your view and say, how do I see this and how am I observing this? And then put yourself in the shoes of that other person, and how are they seeing how you're reacting? How are they taking the situation? And then imagine yourself as being an observer, somebody that's way above the situation, looking down at the two of you in that interaction. When I did this, this went on for about half an hour, and all those angry emotions came out, all of it, verbal and everything. And something snapped at me about halfway through that, half an hour in. All of a sudden, something snapped, and what came out of my mouth shocked me. It came out quiet, and it came out in the terms of, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be understood. And that's what came out of me in that moment. I scared myself in that meditative state. I popped out of it and opened my eyes because it scared the whatever out of me. Um, I share this because of what we were talking about, with the cry for help and how people don't have to do things. Well, because we're not feeling seen and heard and understood, we result to those other things. The reason we have so much violence in society, by the way, it's a lot of people not being seen and heard and understood. So what they do see as a means to get that need met is to go shoot somebody or shoot themselves or beat someone up or choose to hit someone with a car. Like they pick those things not because they're violent people. They pick it because there's a need not being met. And I'm not saying that that's okay to deal with it, because I don't think it is. But I'm saying that if we had spent time with people like that, or if you catch somebody early enough in a suicidal situation like that where they want to shoot themselves, if you can find a way to break through and give them those things of seen, heard, and understood, they will pull so far away from that thing. It won't even be funny, because you're meeting their need at the core. And they will be safe enough and comfortable enough to say that they're hurting. And they'll tell you that. They will say, I'm hurting because of X. I'm in pain because of this. I feel like I'm suffering because of that. I'm alone because of this. And that's where you can get people a lot of times out of those places where they may injure themselves or do something that might land them in jail, for lack of a better term, just as an example. And that too, by the way, bringing this full circle, since we've been talking about God and spirituality, if you run across somebody in your life that stops you for whatever reason, God put them on your path. And I don't say that lightly, because what would happen next if that person didn't come might not have been good for you, and it might have led you in a very bad place. And so having a random stranger come across your path and say, this isn't for you, this is not your purpose right now, and push you off course, that's God coming back down and saying, you don't need to experience that right now. And from what it sounds like too, when your husband shot himself, God said, hey, not your time to come up here yet. You have work to do. You have things to learn down here. It's not your time. You can try to do that, but I'm going to send you back. And like I said, sometimes that is the outcome of those situations, and it's sad, it's hurtful, it's hard, it's a very big challenge. Being married to him, and then also a lot of family dynamics that come out of situations like that. When I lost my grandfather, I lost half my family. I had my family come after me like a knife in the throat, and it was not fun. And it came down to everybody saying, well, you got to see him and you got to be there. And they took out a lot of emotions on me that my mom and my grandmother did to them while I wasn't even home. I lived all the way on the East Coast. I wasn't home for half this stuff. But I walked into a lot of people that had a lot of anger and a lot of emotion. And I said, if you want to take that out on me, that's fine. That's your journey. But I don't need to take that on right now, because I just lost a man. I never had a dad growing up. Grandpa was dad and grandpa for me. And I just lost somebody that's been in my life for 33 years. And I won't spend my time focusing on the negatives of that and those emotions that are trying to control something, or putting blame on me for your lack of whatever you're missing in life, your lack of that's there. I still love you. I'm there for you, but I can't have you in my life, because unfortunately that toxicity is taking away from that experience that God wants me to have. And I have to be smart enough, by the way, because God will find a way to show it to me. Sometimes I can say, I have a choice right now. I have a decision, and I can use my free will appropriately and say that I can love you from a distance. And so sometimes, a lot of people in the world today think that, like forgiveness, for example, everybody thinks that you should go around, and if you get hurt, just forgive the other person and just walk away. Or forgive that person and continue to stay in that relationship to get abused again. And that can be emotionally, verbally, physically. And so that term forgiveness has kind of lost its meaning. And so what I've learned on my journey is, when you find yourself in that place of, forgiveness, for example, forgive yourself first. Don't worry about other people. God's got that. He'll take care of that for you. But forgive yourself. And what I mean by it is be kind to yourself and say, I'll use myself for example. Um, I forgive myself for allowing my in-laws to be as involved as they were in my life with my wife and I. I forgive myself for allowing that to a big degree because it strained my marriage. I did have an ability to speak up. I had opportunities to make my marriage stronger and I didn't take them. It took losing my son to get there. And my wife and I got stronger because of that. But again, I need to forgive myself because I saw opportunities I didn't take. And so to forgive yourself gives you that means to create awareness and consciousness that you have a choice, you have an option, and it's up to you to take that. And God will always give you options. He will always give you choices. He will always find ways to show you what's meant to be and what's not meant to be. And you don't have to control that. He will do it for you. So if you let go of your control, and just say, I'm an observer right now. I'm strictly an observer. I'm living my life in the 3D world. I'm observing what's around me and what's in front of me. I still get a choice on what I like or not, but I also at the same time can forgive myself if I make the wrong choice because God will notify me of that. And that's my cue to say, this isn't for me anymore. This is where I got to take a different path. And God, funny story, when you say that to yourself, what God is really saying upstairs is you're getting back on course. You're getting back to where you should be. You're getting to where things will be good for you. Um, so it's really, that's what I share with that example of forgiveness is just, I know I'm getting off topic a little bit, but don't worry so much about forgiving other people. Don't worry about that so much because again, we can't control what other people say, think, or do or feel about us. We can't control that. What we can control is how we choose to respond. And um, if you believe in God, even if you don't, I didn't believe in him for many years. I didn't. And I had lots of bumps in the road, lots of toxic, just not good things happen to me. And when I started turning to God, things got better. It's weird. It felt weird for me when I said, God, I need help with XYZ in my life. And it would never show up the way I thought it would or the way I wanted it to, but it would happen. And I would reflect back, whether that was a week, a month, or 3 months out, and I go, oh yeah, I talked to God about that, and here's what it played out right here. Um, and so you can have faith in that moment because you're seeing that. And that's kind of where in the 3D world, we're so used to seeing, touching things, hearing things, smelling things, tasting things. That's where our senses are, but God's way above that. And he can do things that we can't see right here, right now, but we'll see it down the road. And as long as we're, my grandpa always had a funny saying. He said, you'll get a lot of opportunities in life. And if you keep your eyes and your ears open, you'll always be seeing and listening to what's coming in front of you. And I share that because God works that way. He works in mysterious ways that I still to this day can't understand. And when I do 5 or 10 years down the road, I go, he was right. He was there the whole time. And I just got to I need to learn to have faith in him. And I'm on my spiritual journey since 2020 is really when I started getting into my faith with him. He's been there for me, even losing my kid, losing my grandfather, um, dealing with my in-laws that were toxic, dealing with my own family that was toxic when he died. God was always there in those moments, even in the roughest times when you felt hopeless, you felt lost, you felt scared, you felt confused, you didn't know what to do. You were trying to control things. He's there. He always is. And so you just need to, I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but what I've learned to do is talk to him. And that's if you want to stare at a wall in your bedroom or in my case, back home, I had a windstorm happen and I had a cross form in one of my trees. I don't know how, but it fell. And I asked God for a sign that he was there with me. And that's what he delivered was a cross in the tree. And so when I wanted to go talk to God, I went down to the end of my driveway and people driving by looked at me like I was some crazy person. But I talked to God and I said, I need help with this, or I'm really grateful for what you showed me now because I see it and I have faith in you. And so, really, I really do feel that if you establish a relationship with God, and He won't always answer you, by the way, sometimes He won't, but He will show you with the things that happen in your life. So as long as you're aware and what I like to call mindful in your life as the observer, as long as you're that, He will show you. He'll show you. It's powerful. So anyway, I'm
Yep.
long-winded.
No, you're good. You're good. Thank you for sharing all that. It reminds me of when the husband, because as we come down here and as we heal, we start remembering of what we signed up down here for. And we start remembering God and the angels give us glimpses and ideas of what is to happen in the next chapters in our life. And so at one point in the 3 years, we were like going through a lot of like fights. And Jesus had mentioned, if you can make it 3 years in a marriage, you can make it forever. But if you can make it past 3 years, then any choices that you make after that is due to your own choice. Like there's like a
Hmm.
contract that you make. And so technically, even though we can be together for the rest of our life, as in like death do your part, kind of per se, at the same time we've like chosen in this because it's yeah, I'm trying not to go off track, but when it comes to God and your contract with Him, it's like you still have a will to choose another path if you want to, or choose the path that you made a contract with, if that makes any sense. But then there's like plan A or plan B. And it's not going to happen because you told me about it. And so I was like, you can't. I wish you didn't tell me. I bet we're going to have like one more year of this fighting. And so sure enough, it was another 1 year because whenever you share anything based on what you experience in the higher realms, if with a lot of people call heaven, if you have that contact with the creator son or the sovereign or whatnot, if it's not meant to be shared, it's not the impact of the people who hear it, the future will unfold in a different way. It'll detour in a certain way. So like he was like trying not to tell me about information about him knowing that Trump was going to win and that Trump was going to be president on the third try, and this was in 2007 when Jesus told him about that, what was going to happen. And so I was like, okay, don't tell me, don't like I have this pattern of telling him, don't tell me, because now it's, or else it's not gonna happen. So yeah, so when it comes to just that contract with God and what us wanting to take that control, it brings back to the facility, that chapter of him going to the facility. The husband had mentioned 2 years ago, he said that on the 8th year, Jesus said on the 8th year of the marriage, we will have a temporary break. And how that's going to look like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, of course, don't tell me, And then I was like, well, tell me so it doesn't happen. So, but anyways, he gave me that little glimpse. And so then when the mother-in-law was talking about the facility and that break, sure enough, it was exactly the 8th, our 8th, it was May when we got married. At the end of towards May, she had mentioned, it was like a week or two after the anniversary, she had mentioned about the transitioning to that process of us just taking that break and breathing time to really get ourselves back closer to God. And she's an agnostic, so she's working with where we're at with what you know our understanding of God. So she's just respecting our faith with where we understand. And yeah, so at first I was like fighting and just telling her, no, it's not gonna happen. No, it's not gonna happen for like a whole hour. She was talking to me until she started showing me of other events that was happening around in that time frame of him transitioning to the facility, because she was saying, well, his aunt who runs the facility, his aunt says that there's this apartment room that's open, which is rarely open because he has a special kind of program with Medicaid and Medicare. So she was saying it's rarely open. Usually the facility is all booked. The rooms are filled up, and this rarely happens that he gets a room that's available for him. And there's this man that just moved in that's about his same age, who went into a coma, and now it was from a seizure. So he can connect with that guy. And so it's all these other things that happened. And it was also on the first floor, so he didn't have to walk or use the elevator, because it takes a lot of his strength, which causes seizures if it's extra, the next floor and so forth. And so everything it worked out. I finally like woke up and I was like, oh, this is what the husband was talking to me about. And so I was just like reassuring to her, and I was like, yes, okay, it's all supposed to happen. This is what we need to do, even though I don't agree with it right now, but I'm starting to I see what you're saying. So it helped me see the bigger picture, that God does have a plan. He is working it out. He had orchestrated everything for it to happen the way it was supposed to, and for her to come in, because just the day before that, he and I were fighting, and I had called her and I said, can you please come here, and we don't have a caregiver and I need a break. And so she was able to spend time with him, and then the next day she said she wanted to come in and talk and discuss with him about something. I was like, oh God, I think she's trying to separate us. That's where my lower mind was at. But overall, God, all of us signed up on this type of script that we all came down here for, to help each other grow in areas that we needed to. Even though a lot of people have issues with in-laws, they're actually a blessing in our life to work in those relationships with ourselves and with how we relate with those individuals. And yeah, we're all in this together as soul family. So yeah. So, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it's, I can say, I didn't really get along with my in-laws, but I'll share this. Coming back to gifts, lessons, and blessings that I always talk about, they showed me a lot of ways I don't want to be in life. And, I try to share that too. Kind of like you said, your in-laws were there for you actually through a hard time, and they helped you through that. Mine did the opposite, and so my gift out of that was, they're not in my life anymore, and that's fine. That's the choice that happened out of that whole conflict. But I also reflect back on that moment and say, I learned a lot of things about how not to treat other people. I learned how I want to carry myself in my life. I learned how to be a better person because of that, seeing what I don't want to be, and what I want to become. So there's always, through those hard lessons, even in what you shared, fighting with your husband, that every marriage fights. I tell everybody that every marriage fights, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a lot of figuring out boundaries and figuring out where to learn. Um, we all have different avenues of life on why we're here. We all have different journeys. And I think especially when you get married, you've got two different personalities from two different backgrounds, two different life experiences, two different, belief systems going on. And the beauty of marriage is that, the ones that work out very, very long term, they find ways to coexist and learn and grow, my grandfather always said this. A marriage is never going to be cut and dry all the time, and roses and rainbows and unicorn and glitter. It's not always going to be that. There's going to be hard times where you disagree, but if you learn how to grow together and learn together and see your journey as one you can share together, you'll always get through those moments that are trials and tribulations. You will always get through those, and you will always become a better person. And that's the beauty of what I wish I saw that view more in marriage in America. I think America kind of sees marriage as a come and go thing on a certain extent, and I wish that we could share more of those examples of marriage that are long lasting and the ones that go through turbulent times, like you said. I've really appreciated today getting to hear your story. I mean, their story has been very different from mine, but it's similar in different ways too. And so to hear about just the spiritual journey you and your husband have been on, especially since 2007, and then going through him shooting himself and going through a huge change of life there, going through a separation period, going through times of fighting where just not seeing eye to eye, and still to this day being able to stay together through that. That is a true testament of having faith, having perseverance, being willing to grow and learn through those things, to experience life in a different way, and to know that when things don't work out or they go a different way or the foundation comes down, like we were talking about with the tower and the death card and tarot, and knowing that you're going to rebuild, but rebuild to something better. To be able to have that view on life through those moments is one of the most beautiful things that we could possibly do.
Yeah, I really do appreciate and love those couples who are able to stay together. But I mean, so 2000. Well, he had the near-death experience in 2007, but we met in 2015. So,
Gotcha.
but when it comes to like the angle of working as partnership with that individual, whether it's a spouse or a partner as a business or whatnot, projects, uh, the chapters that God gives us in our life is a learning process. Because you had mentioned that a lot of people in this society, in this world, see it as a marriage as a come and go kind of thing. It's like what works and doesn't work, then they move on to the next person. But but that's another thing too when it comes to like the marriage aspect of it, or scripture, is the marriage was canonized in the 16th century due to the King Henry VIII, I think, that married multiple wives. And so the Roman Catholic Church implemented marriage as a one man, one woman thing for them to be together for the rest of their life as a union, as a unit under God, a pair unit. And so we can't like put ourselves in a box and think like just because we make a contract with an individual in this world to marry them doesn't mean that you are locked in that marriage, you know. And so it's like it's different for each individual. So like for one
Yeah.
individual pair, they'll be able to go through that life journey together till the deathbed per se. When it comes to the Bible, there's different sectors or of religion that took out canons, books from the Bible. I can't remember if it's like 75 or 105 or 175 books that were taken away, because according to them, they didn't see it as sacred to be put in a book.
Mm.
But mostly they were just taking it out because they didn't see it as consistent, or took it out because of their mental awareness of not seeing that it's like, you know, it's not sacred enough. And so it's like, well, why put the marriage, canonize it in the 16th century just because you didn't agree to this king that married multiple wives, because taken scripture out or taken the Bible out. Back in the primitive times, men would marry multiple wives, or like in the dynasties and the Mormons or the John Smith. But then there's also in higher planets where they have the man as married to multiple wives, but marriage there and family there is different than down here. Like down here, it takes like a village to raise a child. It's the same thing as that angle of how to raise a family. Everybody is connected as family.
I've seen that in my career over the course of my life. Like I've in mortgages, I've worked with everybody from Japanese to Chinese people to Filipinos to Malaysian to African to UK, and to see the difference in cultures and belief systems everyone has, it truly, honestly, it's a beautiful thing. I don't, there's sometimes I've run across people that have bias or belief or I don't remember I forget the term we used to call them in this country. It's like I'm losing the word for it, but when you see how other cultures um, have different societal norms than say Americans, for example, it's nothing to be like scared or intimidated by. It's actually something to be open-minded to. And so for example, I read many years ago that this big article about death in the world and how different cultures across the country or across the world celebrate differently. And they were talking about how here in America, when somebody dies, we don't ever see the body again. It's in a casket or gets cremated, and that's it. And we don't talk about it in a very positive light. We talk about it as a terrible loss and a tragedy and a sadness, and and we're very we're very detached from it. Is where I'm going with that. And so I read about a tribe in Africa, and I don't remember if it was on the West Coast or the East Coast, but in this tribe in Africa, when someone dies, it's a celebration. The whole village, everybody has a huge party. It's a big, big celebration in that tribe to celebrate with a big meal, dancing, bonfire, big rituals that go around it. And when they were interviewing this tribe, one of the tribe members said, "Death isn't a bad thing. Why are you scared of death?" And he said, death for us is that this person has transitioned and graduated from this world into the higher realms. This is to be celebrated for them. We're sad they're not here with us, but we are very excited for them that they've graduated to this next level of spiritual growth. And this is a celebration of their life and who they are. And the way they talked about it was just so polar opposite from what I've been used to in my life. And I looked at it and said, for some reason, that culture makes sense to me in a lot of ways compared to what we do in America. And I've never been to Africa. I don't even know the tribe. But the way they discuss that cultural activity they have around death, to me, that was a very beautiful thing. And I said, I actually would rather celebrate death in that aspect than make it a loss and a lower emotion level like we do in this country a lot. And I just think, where I was going with this is there's a lot of cultures in the world that do things different, and there's so much to be learned. There's so much to be seen, and to miss out on that, if there's a stereotype or a bad belief, it is truly missing out on a beautiful part of life. And it's kind of like it's kind of like bringing this back full circle, like talking about grief and loss and trauma today. We have a lot of issues in America personally with this stuff because we don't teach people how to grieve. America's way of dealing with death is, we'll take the body away from you guys. You'll never see it again. You'll see a casket or a crematory box, and that's it. We'll have a really sad thing at a funeral at a cemetery, and that's it. And we don't ever. And the other half too is, as we say with the jobs, for example, you can have 3 days to grieve, then get back to work. Just move on. It happened. But we're human beings. We're humans with emotion, and so we don't have that thing in us that says, okay, it happened, I can just go back to life like nothing ever happened. We don't have that. And what we do have is our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts and our beliefs. And if we gave people the space when those moments of life happen, to feel those things and understand them and learn from them. Death would not be seen as this terrible thing. It would actually be seen as something we can celebrate and something that we can learn and grow from and see things in that perspective of a gift or a blessing or a lesson and something to propel our lives forward. You know, my grandpa, even though he passed away 5 years ago, whenever I'm working on a woodworking project, I still think about him. I still see him, or if I'm on my sailboat, I'm always thinking about him. He's always there. I act like he's never gone. Same thing with my son. I'll be walking around a, a store like TJ Maxx or a Target or a Marshalls, if anybody listening has those around them. And I'll see random paintings of lions, little baby lions. I'll see it in the store. I'll see a little figurine, or I'll see a painting of some kind. I don't see it all the time, by the way. And it's usually this random, I just glance and go, oh, there's that. It's a sign to me that my son's still with me and he's just saying, hi, I'm still here. Don't forget about me. Um, so I say that death doesn't have to be this terrible thing. I think it really is a celebration to the next level of life. And our time here on the planet is short. This is a short place to be. And it's just the start of our life. It's the start of a beautiful thing. And so if we can learn to celebrate it and learn to find the good through it, and use it as something to help us grow and become better, it doesn't have to be a terrible thing. And we can assign it a new meaning to our life. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So it's like
Yeah.
I didn't realize going so far into it, but I definitely agree with what you said, because that's one of the reasons why I didn't go to my grandfather's funeral, is because the organization where I was at, we celebrated death as just another holiday, as just another graduation for the soul of their transition from this planet to the next realm. And so when I was talking to my grandfather before he died, he was like, "So you think I'll live?" His question was, "So you say there's other planets out there that I'll visit after this one?" And I said, "Yeah, this is just our training ground, and you'll go into the higher realms of other planets and universes and whatnot." And so he started asking all these questions because he's an atheist and he's a lawyer, so he's very, very factual and logical when it comes to the reality of how he builds this foundation in life. And so for him to step out of that mindset and start asking the spiritual realms of understanding of God's ascension plan for us, of how we work and grow with and build our character and personality and our destiny, he was able to open up towards the end of his chapter in life, that it really touched me. That I believe also, because when a person is more aware or awake and acceptance, their mind goes into different levels of experiencing things. And that's where I saw also he was able to come and visit me in the garden and say like, "Oh, you're actually right. There is another world after after this life." And yeah, so yeah, it's really beautiful how you had closed it and tied it up and put it in full circle when it comes to the pain and the process and going through the death process of this journey, this interview, that you wrapped it up really beautifully. And yeah, and was there anything that you wanted to share in regards to the viewers, the listeners, and your angle of how you bring others to in your field and when you coach them? Like, is there some lessons of good word that you want to share with the audience?
Uh, I'll leave everybody with this one. I very much am an intuitive coach. I get asked a lot, do you have a coaching style or process? I always answer no to that question because I like to honor that we all have different journeys and different experiences and we have different paths on this planet. And so to serve you guys with a one size fits all program just would not work, and it won't give you what you're looking for. When when I do coach people, I look to learn about your background and who you are and what your life story has been, and also your experiences you've had. And if I could encourage everybody listening to this today, I want you to be kind to yourself. That's my number one thing that I share with all my clients, especially since COVID happened. Be kind to yourself. There's a lot of, we live in a culture of urgency, a culture of, high speed societal judgments going on. And I want you to not lose yourself in that process. I want you to stay true to your path and true to who you are. And I want you to know that everything that you do and experience in your life is meant for you. It's for you. It's not happening to you. It's happening for you. And if you guys ever want to check me out, I'm happy to. I'm sure Taria will share my info on the link on the podcast. But you guys can always reach out and connect with me on Facebook and Instagram. But if you are going through grief and trauma or loss right now, for example, please, by all means, my biggest advice I can share with you, don't ever let anybody who tells you to move on, don't ever let that come in your brain. It's not a move on situation. It's a move forward and learning how. So take time to process your grief. Try to use a lot of statements like "I feel this way," so you can understand where your emotions are at. Also know that what you're feeling, by the way, in that process, 90% of the time, it's going to be love for that person or that situation that happened. If you're in a situation that, unfortunately was outside of those bounds and was a little more traumatic for, an array of reasons, just know that, a lot of times I didn't have anything to do with you. It was an unfortunate cause on your path. And that did happen to make you a better person, believe it or not. And it will be very, very hard to see in the moment as you're processing your grief. But when you get through that and you find a way to move forward, that will become part of your story that empowers you and becomes something that you can use as a gift to help other people. And so I really want everybody to know grief and trauma and loss does not have to be this negative, heavy bag of coins dragging behind you like a chain ball. It doesn't have to be that. It can be a gift for you to help and serve other people. And I really, truly believe that we're all here on this planet with different paths and different purposes and different reasons. And we can truly help and give back to everyone. We really can. So be kind to yourself. Give yourself space and time to process your grief in your own way. There is no right or wrong situation with that. And just know that you have a gift and you have a blessing, just like I do. And I want you to live that and explore it. And I want you to be empowered by it. So I appreciate you having me on here today, Taria. It's been a great thing to talk with you guys today. It's been beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris, for being here on this platform with me. And as like you said, everything is orchestrated and just like planned out. And serendipitously, we are at the season in winter, and we are the end of 2024, where we're in this chapter of coming into a new year. And so it's I could not have planned it better when it comes to just God really implementing how things need to work out and unfold. And thank you again, and for making it this far too. And thank you for those who are with us through this interview at this far, that you've just made it this far to really listening to what Chris had to say and share. And yeah, and just continue going forward in your journey and in your faith and whatever it is that keeps you stable, and that foundation as entrepreneurs or in your journey in this growth that you're going, discovering yourself. And reach out to him definitely if you are, and pass this interview on to your family and friends who may need to hear the message of the things that he had shared. And yeah, and thank you again, and have a very, very wonderful weekend, and beautiful going forward of the following year. Happy New Year and happy holidays. Thank you.